Yay, Media Group.
What if the boldest coffee in New Orleans doesn't come from a coffee bean at all? Roast Master Felton Jones joins us to share hundreds of years of history, some flavor science, and a few surprises about one of the Crescent City's iconic and perhaps most underrated ingredients. In today's episode, we are talking all things chicory. A quick note before we dive into today's podcast. If you like what you hear, I would love for you to subscribe to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, wherever you download your podcast. It would also be incredible if you take a minute to rate and review this podcast. Those things do matter and they really help us. I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. Chicory's journey started completely on the other side of the world before it finally made its way over to the U.S. to become a flavor and a tradition synonymous with New Orleans. And to walk us through this journey, I am joined by Felton Jones, Roast Master and brand ambassador for PJ's Coffee and New Orleans Roast. Felton's career spans more than 30 years, so I'm always thrilled to get his insight on all things coffee. In today's episode, he and I do a taste test, and we do it with just straight unblended chicory. And spoiler alert, he and I were both surprised at really just how much we liked it. In our conversation today, you'll hear us talking about flavor revelations. How does this chicory blend add such boldness? It softens that acidity and it also lowers that caffeine. And Felton shares how and why he now sees chicory as a legitimate decaf option instead of seeing it just as a way to stretch our coffee, to make it last longer. We'll share some fun facts, like the fact that the same plant that gives us chicory coffee is also what gives us chicory root extract. This is something that we also see listed on ingredients as inulin. It's a sneaky little source of fiber that we see in so many things like bread, cereal bars, even ice cream. We've got practical brewing tips for you from my go-to stovetop percolator to French press or pour over espresso. We've got Felton's tips to strike that perfect balance at home. So whether you're a coffee connoisseur or you just love a good story, settle in, grab a cup, black, Olay, or iced, and let's get fueled. Together, we're going to talk about the history of chicory, and then we're going to dive in a little bit more to the chicory root itself. So there's something that we talk about nutritionally, chicory root fiber. It's something called inulin that is kind of this fiber superstar in a lot of nutritional foods. And so how is this chicory root also used in coffee and also used as a fiber kind of filler in these foods? And then we'll talk about how to add it to our brews. And so we can use something like chicory to help to dial back our caffeine. We can use chicory to boost the flavor. So we'll be talking about these three things really primarily, kind of the history of it, the story behind it, I'm going to come back to all that. So never mind. So we'll just say, here we go. So whether you are a coffee connoisseur or you love just a good story, settle in, grab a cup, whether it's black, Olay, iced. Let's dive into the flavorful story that is chicory coffee. So welcome, Felton.
Thank you.
This is our second episode together.
It is.
I roped you in first to do plant-based milks.
And I remember having some pleasant surprises. I'm not a milk person, but we muscled through and there was some great experiences out of that. So
plant-based creamers, we should say, coffee creamers. And I thought, wow. And you typically drink your coffee black, but being a good sport and good natured and doing that. As we were did that podcast, we had the conversation together about chicory.
We did.
This is sort of when someone is looking for a decaf option, there's decaf. Well, we talked about also the decaffeination process.
Yes.
Did we do 2 podcasts then? Maybe we have.
We did. I think we did. I think we did that one remotely.
Yes.
Yeah. That was our first one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Looking at the different ways that coffee is decaffeinated, because some people do have concerns about what's in my decaf coffee.
Yep. And
one solution that you offer up is, hey, something like chicory is just naturally decaffeinated.
Yep.
So you and I right now we have a cup of regular coffee.
Yes.
Felton's is black. Mine has a splash of half and half in it. And then we have a cup. You brought over a bag of chicory.
Yes.
And when you look at chicory, it looks like, as you were to kind of spoon through the bag of it, it looks like coffee grounds.
It does.
But it's not at all.
No, it's a little bit coarser than you would normally see for coffee, for your regular drip process.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what chicory is first before we have our sip and comparison, just for our listeners?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the coffee world, we just know it as just being a ground roasted root. People are often curious about what do we do with it or how do we receive it? We receive it in the same format that it's used to be able to blend directly into coffee. So for us, we receive it in, specifically for us, we go for the French chicory. So there's several origins of chicory. We do French chicory that is typically noted as the higher grade, the best grade. And even within the French chicory, there are different grades of it. I find that there's an American version, there's a Spanish version, and different consistencies, such as like how much powder or dust may exist, in what you receive, can be concerning. And then flavor profile wise, the French chicory has a slight, even though it's, for the average palate, it's just going to be bitter, but there is a slight sweetness to it. So that's the reason that we decided that the French chicory is the best chicory for us.
So Felton brought a bag of French chicory here that's sitting in front of me, and it says exactly that, French chicory. It's the PJ's Coffee brand. It says right on the front, caffeine-free. And when you open it, if you were to just look at it, it looks a little bit like a coarse ground coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
When you smell it, it has undertones that you would say that smells like coffee, but it would smell like something's not right about coffee. Like it's not your usual scent to the coffee.
Kind of has that earthy kind of aroma to it.
And here in New Orleans, especially, we have coffee and chicory. And tell us kind of what the tradition is for that in New Orleans.
So for a long time, beyond the fact that, now we're focusing on, health benefits, caffeine-free, all of those things that really do matter. For a long time, it was used in a way to kind of lower the cost of coffee. It sort of cheapened up the price for a bag of coffee.
Like an extender.
Yeah, it was used as an extender originally, but as that flavor profile stuck, chicory and coffee blends, it was nothing for it to be as high as like 50%, and chicory has such a potency that, even today when you go down and have your beignets and cafe au lait, it's very, very potent. So some brands have really, they've held on to that traditional kind of punch of chicory. Whereas one of the things we wanted to do, like we didn't want to go out and source a coffee that we would just kind of like, we didn't really have to worry about the overall quality or flavor profile of that coffee because the chicory was going to overpower it. We did just the opposite. We wanted to make certain that the same coffee that you would have, our dark roast or our French roast, we use that coffee and we add the chicory to it. And so we've dialed way back on the chicory percentage because we want you to taste coffee with a hint of the chicory.
And so when you're doing your cafe au lait, is it that y'all are using a little chicory in it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So when the cafe au lait, we, especially because you're adding milk to it, it is going to be a little bit of a different experience when you experience our cafe au lait because once again, you have the coffee that is diluted with the chicory. But
what percentage do y'all use now?
We use 20%.
Okay. So, but some, like you said, 50-50 was what used to be.
Yeah.
And when we say it's an extender, it's basically stretching that coffee.
It stretches the coffee. So in the coffee industry, it was really a thing of chicory was a fraction of the cost of a pound of coffee. So if I can do 50% chicory, it really was from an overall cost perspective.
And when y'all are receiving the chicory, you're receiving it ground, this coarse ground already.
Correct.
Whereas beans, you're receiving the beans roasted and then grinding. And the reason is chicory is never going to arrive in a bean because it's not a bean. and I think that's something that's kind of hard when you think coffee and chicory. number one, the chicory isn't a bean, it's a root.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's actually the chicory root. It doesn't have any caffeine in it,
No.
but it has that really strong flavor.
Very strong, very rich.
So when someone is tasting something that has even just 20% added to it, it's such a bold flavor.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to imagine that it's not also higher caffeine.
Yeah. And I think that for those, I've had conversations with individuals who just for whatever reason can't drink coffee or they just want to stay away from the caffeine. The chicory helps them out in the sense that there's so much potency to it. If they brew chicory by itself in place of coffee, they're dialing back the volume, the amount, so
Which is what you and I just did in our
Yeah,
kitchen.
yeah.
Let's taste it real quick before it gets too cold.
Oh, boy,
So
here we
I
go.
know. I asked Felton, I said, have you ever tasted just pure chicory coffee? And you hadn't, right? Is this
it's just something that like,
what do you think?
um,
I haven't tasted mine yet.
it's so that aftertaste that kind of steps up. It really makes me realize that we're drinking straight chicory, but when it initially hits your palate, for me, it's very potent, but it's
I like it.
Yeah, it's not bad.
I was apprehensive, especially when I said, Felton, have you tasted pure chicory? You said, no, because you're experimenting with all the blends. What percent do we do?
Right,
and dialing it
right,
in just right.
Right.
And I was a little hesitant. I thought it was really strong and concentrated. And so I used the stovetop mocha, MOKA, that it's kind of like a percolator.
Right.
And Felton's guidance was, you know what, just put half in there. So it was not only is it a fraction of the price of regular coffee, I only used half the amount
Yep.
of grounds compared to that.
Yep.
Boy, I like it.
Yeah.
To me, it almost is like a shot of espresso.
It kind of is, and then there's a like a sort of like an herb,
Yeah.
like as it lingers.
Yeah. I don't mind it at all. I think it's very pleasant. And then we had a cup of regular
Kind of
coffee.
silky too. It's kind of silky. It lingers in a pleasant way on the palate.
I'm glad that we tried that. I think it's really nice. And so there's a couple of different things that we'll cover with y'all that I thought were just interesting things. And so one is simply just that chicory, it's a totally different thing than coffee beans. It tastes so strong. Like we said, it's almost like it's a shot of espresso, yet there's no caffeine, but it has this bold flavor. A lot of people tend to have strong feelings one way or another about chicory. They either really love it, they're excited whenever they're somewhere that's serving it, or they don't want it at all.
It boils down to, as it pertains to coffee, it boils down to, do I consider myself as a self-proclaimed coffee connoisseur, a specialty coffee person, a knowledgeable coffee person, or do I just proclaim myself to be a coffee lover? And if you're a coffee lover and you're from the South or you're from New Orleans, chicory is never going to be a bad thing for you. It's almost like a sacrilegious thing if you're a specialty and you're not going to put chicory in your Ethiopian Yirgacheffe. So that's always been the dividing line between the two sides. One of the things I can say though is that and this is sort of the definition that I've lived by. Chicory not being considered a specialty or gourmet product, not because it's not worthy, but you said something earlier. It's already in the ground format. So you can't blend those grinds with beans. And in the world of specialty coffee, you want to grind your beans moments before you brew your beans to retain the freshness up until brewing. So if we were to pre-grind the coffee and then blend the chicory and then bag that and put that on our shelves at our PJ's cafes, it's not really considered a specialty because specialty is whole bean.
Right.
So it's just really by definition of the two formats and how you blend them together, and the fact that you have to pre-grind those beans and you start the aging process. You start to accelerate it when you grind it. When
we're looking at the differences between chicory and this other product that I was talking about, chicory root extract, as a dietitian for, now 25 years more, 26, chicory root has been something, chicory root extract is something that I've been aware of almost all of that time. And it's used, it's actually used as a fiber in foods.
Yeah.
And we call it chicory root extract, or sometimes you'll see it as inulin on a label. And it's like the word insulin, but without the S.
Okay.
And so I did some research into it, and I'm like, most inulin is made from chicory root. And then I looked to say, is all inulin chicory root extract? And it isn't. There's other ingredients that can be used to extract that fiber that's used as this inulin, but all chicory root extract is inulin. Right?
Okay.
And what's the inulin? It looks like a fine white powder. It looks like Sweet and Low or Equal or something like that. I remember I went to this food science expo that happened to come into New Orleans, and Brad was with me. We're walking to the convention center. He's like, this is just we've got a white powder that we're going to say is doing some like magical stuff for you, because every single one of these, it could have been omega-3s, whatever they were saying was like a functional ingredient to add to your foods. They were all these fine white powders that dissolved.
Wow.
But that a lot of those were inulin. And what's interesting about it is it adds bulk to food.
Right.
It can take the place of flours. So like if you're having, say a tortilla or a bread, they can make that lower carb by adding less flour because they're putting in this inulin, this chicory root extract. And so it's a bulking agent. It takes the place of flours or other grains. It's just pure fiber, and it doesn't have a carbohydrate impact. So it doesn't have a net carb impact on our glucose levels. And so forever, I see inulin / chicory root extract in foods. And it never occurred to me as I'm thinking coffee and chicory.
Right.
Because I've seen them in two totally different applications. So as you and I were preparing for this, I was like, what is the difference here?
Yeah.
And they're both from the same plant. They're both from the chicory root, and specifically what's referred to as the tap root for that. They're processed differently, and to make it that fiber or that inulin, it's more of a hot water extraction, a filtration, and it's at a lot lower temperature than when that same exact root is
used for coffee.
Roasted for coffee. And so it's exactly the same. So the when you look, then I thought, well, does chicory coffee give us the fiber and what's called like the prebiotics? Like that fiber is considered prebiotics, or that food for that good bacteria to kind of feed on. Which I thought, well, that would be great if we can announce this. It doesn't. So the inulin or the chicory root, it's high in fiber. It has a really neutral taste, a tiny bit of a sweetness, that fiber benefit, the prebiotic benefit, but almost all of that is lost whenever it's made into the chicory, when it's roasted for chicory to put into coffee.
Wow. Ironically, caffeine is sort of the same way. So caffeine in its pure form, once it's extracted, it's in the white powder, oddly enough. But same thing. It's the longer we roast coffee beans, the more we're impacting the caffeine. In coffee beans, hence why light roasts are, such a big trend.
Because it's a higher caffeine content.
High caffeine content.
It's so interesting. Yeah. So for those of y'all who are seeing it and you're like, hey, is chicory coffee similar of that? Or if you had never thought about it, as I hadn't, but then kind of became aware, it's not. It's the same exact product or same root, but totally different processing and outcome also. I've read that chicory also lowers the acidity of coffee.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. And when you taste it in that pure form like we did, you can see how. It's very subtle. It's very smooth. It has the mouthfeel. It coats your palate, and it doesn't just wash away.
A little bit of a sweetness too. That I was really not expecting. So for someone who is on a budget or needs decaffeinated coffee, I mean, if they're not already doing this.
A bag of chicory, a pound of chicory will last you for a long time.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So tell us the backstory. How did it even get here? Because it didn't originate here in New Orleans. Right. Do other parts of the U.S. use chicory like we do?
It's amazing how there's got to be so many different uses for it, because it's one of our number one sellers. It is our number one seller on Amazon. And we have learned, I've had some specific stories like there's a someone out on the West Coast buys like 200 to 300 pounds at a time from us. And they are into health products. And I think they make some sort of a vitamin or something they use it for. Um, Chefs use it a lot for cooking. Apparently, it can tenderize meat. That's one use for it in cooking. Another use for it in cooking is an ingredient in your rub for preparing meat.
Seasonings.
Yeah, seasonings. But I don't think that it's as widely used for coffee outside of the South as you would think. So it's just one of those mysteries, like what are all of the different things that people are
Right.
doing with it? And I was very blown away as I started taking the opportunity to poll customers whenever someone would reach out to us with a question, and oftentimes the question is about caffeine.
Yeah.
Is there caffeine in it? When I have that opportunity to poll these customers, the number of customers that were drinking it and enjoying it as a straight chicory brew, I couldn't believe it. So
Right.
now today,
Yeah.
because of you, Molly, I now understand like they are acquiring a palate for it. And as you said, I'm doing it just straight black. I can imagine that with that subtle sweetness and that mouthfeel, that if I were a milk drinker, some ratio of just straight chicory to milk could be very palatable.
How the traveling here and the tell us about that backstory, because I read that even before like recent history, thousands of years ago, the first recorded use of it was in places like ancient Egypt and Rome, and they were using it as almost like a tonic, digestive tonic, and that they looked at it for medicinal use. But that was thousands of years ago. But in the 1700s, it wasn't until it started being used in as a drink, like coffee.
There's so many wonderful stories out there about just coffee and its journey around to get, becoming popular and available in certain places. And I read somewhere where the first introduction of what we call coffee houses, they refer to it as something different. And it was almost like the prohibition kind of thing where these places were deemed as not really good places. And so they were like shut down in some places. And in some parts of history, chicory kind of came in as a replacement for coffee, where coffee was banned, in certain places. It is.
It's so quaint.
It is.
With all the things we deal with now, right?
So in terms of the French, and I think that the whole connection of New Orleans and the French and that sort of thing, I think it has some connections. But so there was, obviously there's a backstory to the preexistence of it here in New Orleans. But luckily it was here because during the time of the Civil War, where the North created these blockades, the Navy created blockades, and so coffee was available. Because I've heard some stories in the past where there were shortages on coffee, and you kind of think to origins of coffee, like were there issues with growing it or what have. No, coffee was available, but because of the war, the ships couldn't come up the Mississippi to supply ships, so coffee became something that they had to ration. And the introduction of adding chicory to it as a filler to stretch the coffee supply, it took. And because of the palate developing a liking to it over time, it just never went away. And what's really, really cool is when you think about it, for me, being in coffee for 30 years, chicory was kind of deemed as like this thing that was kind of going away. It was like this thing that was like, sometimes we refer to it as a dying generation, like the older generation who wanted it.
Right.
And then, so you kind of saw it go away. And, as we live in our world of tariffs today, there was a point in time where chicory was sort of roped into like it was encompassed in a group of products that were going to be hit with tariffs. And so the tariff on chicory went up extremely high back during the George Bush era. And so
before we were even talking about tariffs.
Right. And it wasn't directly targeted at chicory. It's just like with anything like that. It's like there's this long list of things, and chicory just happened to be one. And for that reason, the price of chicory, which prior to that could be as low as 40 or 50 cents a pound. And since then, after that, it, exceeded $1 a pound. So it like increased by 100%. Today, it's still a fraction of the cost of a pound of coffee. So I think that today, you're definitely sub $2 on, a pound of chicory when we go out and buy it in the bulk volume that we do, which is, really large container loads. Right. Of it. So for coffee brands that were once using a very heavy ratio of chicory to coffee, that the reasoning behind that sort of dictated that became a thing of the past. And so you have your household brands that will always be known for, their heavy chicory, percentages. I think in New Orleans, what you'll find is that is more towards the brands that are like, kind of like our touristy, souvenir kind of brands. But your really homegrown, authentic coffee brands are going to use it in a way that, like we do, where you're either offering it as a pure chicory for people to make their own recipe, or you're going to do a much reduced percentage of chicory,
And like I said, PJ's is doing a 20% of it chicory. So if someone is like, okay, I want to try this. Yeah. Okay. So number one, if you're local, you can find the French chicory on shelves at PJ's. Yep. If you're not, Amazon,
PJscoffee.com, NewOrleansRoast.com. Yep. We have it on all of those places.
And the grind here is, I would say, a little bit of I'm not an expert on the type of that, but I look at that and I say coarse.
It's coarse.
Okay.
Yeah, it's coarse. And honestly, I didn't have this opinion until today. But what I would suggest is that anyone who is new to this, I would actually suggest to them to try it the way that we did. Try it as a straight brew so that you can really get a feel for it. And then rather than the old days of how much chicory do I add to coffee, figure out how much coffee you need to add to your chicory, because you might actually develop something that you're pretty fond of.
And all people are looking for all these other alternatives. You and I both, we've talked about mushroom coffee. Mm-hmm. I have really loved and experimenting with mushroom coffee way more than I thought I would.
I will tell you that as of April of this year, I was at a conference and I gave the mushroom thing a try. I am on board.
Right. Yeah. You heard it here, folks.
I am on board. Yeah. It's delicious.
Yeah.
And I guess, I do this every day for a living. So, I don't mean to just keep repeating mouthfeel, but mouthfeel is important to me. And so it's not just like with this chicory, it's not just a washed away thing. Honestly, tasting the chicory, and then we tasted our coffee second. The aftertaste of the coffee is what you'd expect because we're drinking an espresso. Right. But on the front end, it's kind of watered down. Yeah. And this is an espresso shot that we're drinking, in comparison to. So mouthfeel really is an important thing to me. And that's what I got with the mushroom. Yeah.
So I think you've got now, if you say, okay, you're either choosing not to have caffeine or you can't have caffeine, but you still want the whole ritual of it. Mushroom coffee is an option. The chicory is an option. And then of course there's all different types of decaf coffee. It's still the option, but I like having that to where you can kind of play around and see what works best. So if someone's trying the chicory at home, you and I use today that stovetop percolator.
Yes.
And I spell it because when we say mocha, a lot of times people think chocolate mocha, like MOCHA. The mocha is MOKA is the brand of there's a different brand that I don't know how to pronounce, but it's the stovetop, kind of two parts that fit together. You could also use a French press.
You could use a French press. One of the things to help the audience understand what you're describing with the mocha pot, a lot of times it's a some people refer to it as a stovetop espresso. And then in the Cuban coffee world, this is how they make the Cuban coffee, utilizing, that.
A little percolator.
Like a percolator is what it is, yeah.
Could someone use, I would think so, the chicory just in a regular drip coffee maker?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And you may find that there's a certain percentage of it that's going to just dilute, right into the beverage.
Yeah. Okay. Do you drink drip coffee as much, or do you do?
When I do, it's more of a pour over. Or I tell you what, if I'm going to drink a cup or maybe go back for a second cup, I'm going to do something like a pour over or maybe an espresso shot or Americano. If it's, just one of those days where you're going to go in or like a Saturday morning, make the pot. And that's when I enjoy my drip. And I'll just kind of like keep on, topping off.
And you could use the chicory for a pour over as well.
Could.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all of that. So you basically, whatever you're doing with your regular coffee grounds, you can do. If you're using something that is like a Nespresso pod or a Keurig pod, not as much.
I mean, it's
more like a ground coffee.
I think the hardest part about this is what we're talking about is really unique to the individual that's doing it.
Yeah.
And so there's really not like a science to it where outside of us in the coffee world kind of coming up with the percentages we want to blend in coffee. Now we're talking about people making straight chicory.
Right.
We're talking about, maybe complementing your chicory with coffee instead of the other way around. I think that there's really a lot of trial and error that people have the freedom to and have some fun with it. I mean, it's good for you. I mean, we're talking about something that has some health benefits to it, obviously.
And we talked about using half the amount that you would normal coffee. So if someone's brewing it, same thing. If whatever way you're making it, whether it's French press or pour over or drip or a percolator stovetop, cut it in about half because it is so strong. And that's what we did here. And it turned out well. And then something like, tell us the ratio for if someone is going to do a cafe au lait, say just pure chicory though.
I think if they're going to do a cafe au lait, I would still go, half the amount of coffee just because you're going to make that much of a potency. And adding your milk to it would be, I think you would be spot on. I think that the notion of maybe having to go heavier on the chicory is kind of one of those things where there's just a certain point of potency that you're going to reach, and then anything else you may not even detect. So I think that half, that 50% of what you would normally do for coffee is perfect.
And if you're not sure, do I want to try this? The price point says yes. Just try it.
And in today's world, we're in 2025 and I've been doing this for 30 years. And in my 30 years, we've never seen the price of coffee skyrocket the way that it did as a commodity. So 2020, the end of 2024 and so far all of 2025 has been very challenging. And it's to the extent that it is it is the determination for some companies of whether they stay in business or not. We've seen that. So chicory as an alternative, it could save the day for a consumer, and who knows, maybe that's why it's such a hot item for us.
Right. It's true. So if you're thinking, okay, maybe not, the pros, as we said, it's way smoother than I would have anticipated solo. That slight bit of a sweet effect even. Doesn't have a bitterness that I was expecting at all. Zero caffeine, naturally caffeine free, a really low price point. And, and again, you can do it just pure. You can choose to do that 20% blend, 80% coffee, 20% blend, like what the PJs does for their cafe au lait. Or like Felton said, start with just your pure chicory and then see, do I want to just go this way or do I want to add a little bit of coffee to that? Yep. Anything else you want to add for your app?
No, I think that covers it. I learned some things today.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
Having a pro here, it's like, all right, you're always a good sport, down to try whatever we've got.
Well, and I think it's a testament to, this is one of the exciting things about coffee. It's like, give in to trying new things and be open-minded to what others may think. The first time that I heard someone tell me that they were brewing chicory 100% in place of coffee, I thought that they were out of their minds. And so now I see, so for the cafe au lait drinkers out there, I think you'll be impressed. You go down to Cafe Du Monde, that's a pretty stiff cup of coffee and there's a lot of chicory in there. So you're already halfway there
right.
If you're drinking that. So why not try it at home?
It's interesting too, because it's new, but it's also one of those, what's old is new again.
Yep.
Which is also there's so many things that are kind of finding their way back into what's current that have been around for so long, but we're just now kind of rediscovering them.
We thought it was a dead thing. And I honestly, I don't know where the boom happened, across the country where people were just looking for it. But it's out there. And, I think that kind of toot our own horn a little bit. We put the emphasis on the French chicory, and when we started doing the research to see what was available out there outside of that French chicory, it was very limited, what the average consumer could go out and buy. And then as we started bagging it for retail and making it available, we were blown away that the local grocery stores were like, we want that. And it's taken off. So,
and not just for the little old ladies coming in.
Yeah. And I think the biggest challenge is, and this really goes back a long time ago when we, so very early on during Phyllis's era, we did have a French roast with chicory.
Phyllis, the founder of PJs.
Yes. We had a French roast with chicory. And then when we decided that, hey, we're going 100% whole bean across the board, we're not pre-grinding anything, the French roast with chicory, fell by the wayside. And in place of that, we offered a bag of straight 100% chicory, which we had to pull because the consumer mindset was that was a bag of coffee and chicory, and their palates were not prepared for that. So as we had more and more of those instances, we realized that, we just have to pull it. And so now what you're saying is true. It's that somehow there's been a revolution of it, and there's a rebirth of it, and the popularity is bigger now than it ever was before. And kind of now where history is repeating itself, because in all of those lands afar, Egypt, as you spoke about, France and all, it's now being used again in the same way that it was used centuries ago. And that's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It's really, really cool. I appreciate your time for this. I think part of the reason I love doing this podcast so much is that I'm always learning too. And, for the listener, I've got note pages in front of me. Felton does too. There's things that are always that little extra to figure out and share. So thanks for doing this with me.
Thanks for having me.
Always love my conversations with Felton. He's got so much insight, so much experience and expertise, and he's always so revved up to continue to learn. And there's so much technology now in the space of coffee and that world, but he's also so open to kind of this concept of what's old is new again. And so I always enjoy it. I'm thinking already of what's our next step that we'll have Felton on for. So let us know if you try it. If you've been a chicory drinker forever and you're like, man, y'all are just now getting into this, let us know it. If you haven't tried it, or if it's been a while since you've tried it and you do, we always want to hear about it. Reach out to me. If you'd like more fueled wellness and nutrition, head over to mollykimball.com. You can also follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And join us next time for another dose of fueled wellness and nutrition. Thanks for listening and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.